And that sounds really familiar. It sounds like what Donald Trump did and continues to do as the still sort of titular head of the Republican Party. And that leads to another factor that you write about, and that is the downgrading of status of a once
Yeah,
favored group. That's what you were getting at there with the Serbs and the
yeah,
Croats. But we're going through that here in the United States. And we have an audience question that
yeah.
is tied to this notion. And the question is, do you think the Civil War some Americans are aiming for is between white and black people, not between Democrats and Republicans?
It is absolutely between white and non-white people. It's not between Democrats and Republicans. And I'll give you a little historical perspective, and then I'll talk about what's happening here in the United States. So, I've been studying civil wars around the world for 30 years. There's an incredibly rich body of research about who starts civil wars and how they start. And it's not how people think. The people who tend to start wars are not the poorest groups in society. They're not the groups that are most discriminated against or most oppressed. They're not the immigrants. Those groups tend to be too weak and too disempowered to have any chance to organize. The groups that tend to start wars, especially ethnic wars, are groups that had once been dominant and have either recently lost power or they see themselves losing power demographically over time. They're the ones who feel this deep sense of loss of status. They feel this deep sense of resentment. And importantly, they truly believe that the country is theirs, that the country should look like them. It should practice their religion. It should be based on their culture because it's always been like that. And I'm speaking about when I say this, it sounds like I'm being informed entirely by the United States, but this
Yeah.
research was done decades ago. If you look at the Muslims in southern Mindanao had been a Muslim majority region of the Philippines forever. And then they became part of the Philippines. The Philippines is heavily Catholic. It's also far more populated than Mindanao. And when the government started creating incentives for Catholics to move south, to settle in Mindanao, and gave them some of Mindanao's rich land, gave them some of the best civil service jobs. The Muslims saw their influence and their power, their political power, their economic power, the cultural power declining. And they tried to work within the system, but they were grossly outnumbered. And eventually, extremists within their group formed a military and began
Mhm.
to fight the central government to try to regain power. And you could look at the Catholics in Northern Ireland. You could look at the Palestinians in Israel. You could look at the Assamese in India. You see this again and again and again.